Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's video, we will be looking at part 2 of a lesson in which I'm covering May 2025 Oxford International AQA A Levels Psychology Paper 1. In the previous part of the lesson, I have already covered section A, memory. In this part, I'm covering section B, social psychology. So, in this lesson, we are going to look at model answers for the questions. And as we are looking at these model answers, I will explain to you how to interpret what the question requires, how to interpret the marks allotted, what strategies to use to structure your answer, what kind of content to cover, and how to meet mark scheme requirements to get full marks in every answer. So, the intent is not to make you memorize these answers, but to make you learn how to write these answers. Before we begin, I just want you to know that I'm a private tutor for AQA and Oxford AQA, GCSE, IGCSE, and A levels psychology. I've been tutoring for more than 10 years now. So, if you wish to schedule your classes with me, my contact number and email ID are available in the description box and pinned comment below. Okay, so let's begin with the first question. It asks us to outline Milgram's findings and conclusions into the influence of proximity on obedience, and this is worth 4 marks. Firstly, we should look at the command term outline. Outline is an AO1 command term, meaning only description is required. What we have learned in the course about Milgram studies on proximity, we are just going to draw content from there. We are not going to give any application or evaluation. Next, we need to focus on what the question is exactly asking us for. It is asking us for findings and conclusions. When it comes to Milgram's proximity studies, no doubt we have also learned about aims, procedure, we have some background on why he did the studies. They are asking for none of that. They are strictly asking for findings and conclusion. A general rule in your A levels exam is only answer what the question is asking for. Some students tell me it looks abrupt to just come to the findings without describing the procedure. That is not your concern. It's not about what the answer looks like, it is about meeting the requirements of the question. So stay focused. If you look at the mark schemes, there are clear requirements that the answer should be focused. And that is what they mean by focus. It should be relevant to what is being asked for. If you give procedure or aims, you're losing focus because you're not concentrating on what's asked for. Instead, you're including something that is beyond the scope of the question. So make sure strictly you only give findings and conclusion. Now, when it comes to the findings, an FAQ is, do we have to report exact numerical results? And the answer is yes. For your answer to be considered detailed, as hard as it might seem to remember the percentages for all the variations, be it Milgram or Ashes variations, you do have to remember the percentages. And that is why when I teach the course only, that time only I make students aware that that is where their effort is going to go in remembering the percentages. Now, which variation have they asked for? The proximity variation. So, same like you just have to give findings and conclusions, nothing else. In the same way, you have to give only the proximity variation. For example, you do not give the location variation. If you do not know what the proximity variation was, there is no point of writing the location variation and thinking, okay, maybe they'll give me 1 or 2 marks for that. They will not. They will strictly give you marks for what is asked in the question and nothing else. So, do one thing. If you don't know about the proximity variation, go a little ahead, answer the other questions, come back later and think about what is the proximity variation. But do not waste time writing anything irrelevant. You have only 1 minute per mark for this paper. You cannot afford to waste time. It is for 4 marks. Now, there are two approaches that you can take when it comes to 4 marks for this type of question. Because they haven't really specified, they want you to give one variation or two. Either you can give any one proximity variation and you can elaborate on it enough, like give 4 points from it to justify 4 marks. Or alternatively, your strategy can be take two proximity variations and each outline to justify 2 marks, meaning give 2 points from each. I would strongly recommend the second strategy for this one, because after all, you're restricted only to findings and conclusion. Unless you have the ability to really interpret the findings meaningfully and draw out a detailed conclusion, which most students are not good at, avoid giving the first type of answer in which you're taking only one variation. You might not be able to give enough detail to justify 4 marks. Okay, let's look at the model answer. As we look at it, I'll point out to you how it is meeting all the requirements. So, this answer tells us that in one variation, Milgram found that when teacher and learner were in the same room, obedience dropped from baseline of 65% to 40%. See, first thing, teacher and learner were present in the same room. Can you see how very briefly the procedure is mentioned? Even in fact, more than procedure being mentioned, it's just indicating to the examiner that which variation is being spoken about. After all, we are going to take two proximity variations, 1 and 2. So the examiner should know which one we are talking about in the first paragraph. Strictly from that perspective, this point has been mentioned that teacher and learner were in the same room, but there is absolutely no attempt to explain how the teacher and learner were in the same room, or how this is different from the baseline procedure, what were the roles of the teacher and the learner. Nothing like that has been described. Why? Because that would count under the procedure, so that is totally avoided, and straight off the results are given. Now, one more question that will come is, do we have to give the baseline result and then say against that it was only 40%? I would strongly recommend yes. Because when you compare with the baseline, that shows you that how important proximity is when it comes to obedience. Because when the teacher and learner are in the same room, that proximity which makes the teacher see the suffering of the learner is what brings down obedience to 40%. Only in contrast you can explain how obedience is getting affected. If I just say 40% and I don't give the baseline rate, it doesn't show the impact of proximity. Because overall, what is obedience? Like, what is 40%? What is the reference against which we are understanding it? Okay, so it is important to specify the baseline as it has been given here. And exact percentages are there, like I told you, the learner has memorized the exact percentages and written. This is the approach which is needed. Okay, then they have asked for conclusion. Remember one thing, here also students like make a common mistake. They do not differentiate between finding and conclusion. Finding is a particular result specific to the study. Conclusion is a broader theoretical generalization or an inference that we are drawing from the study, or an implication of the study. Okay, so don't just reiterate the finding. Like, what some students will do is, they will say that this is 40% compared to baseline of 65%, meaning that in this variation the obedience was lower than it was in the baseline. Is it not making the same point as the first one? Right, it does not give any interpretation. What are we understanding from this finding? That is not made clear when we just reiterate the point in different words. So here you can see the conclusion. Being physically closer to the victim made it harder to deny their suffering, which reduced obedience. Reasoning is given. Implications. What are we understanding from this has been explained. That yes, being near the learner makes it difficult for the teacher to give the shocks. This is the way of giving the conclusion. So, for this first finding, the student will get 1 mark. For this first conclusion, they'll get 1 mark. So, 2 marks are secured here. For the remaining 2 marks, a second variation is given. Also, just keep in mind, the very purpose of doing these variations by Milgram was to see what factors can increase or decrease obedience. That is why also it's very important to compare to baseline, because without that baseline reference, there's no understanding what factors are playing a role. Let's look at the rest of the answer. In another variation, the experimenter gave orders over the telephone. This is the telephone variation. Here, obedience fell dramatically to 20.5%. Here the baseline is not mentioned again because it is already given at the top. But in case if you're taking the telephone variation as the first one or the only one in your answer, then make sure to specify the baseline. Okay, so again here there's a finding clearly with numbers and no unnecessary elaboration of any procedure or aim, nothing like that is there. Then a conclusion is given. Physical appearance of a legitimate authority figure is powerful factor in creating obedience. Sorry, not physical appearance, physical presence. So again, what are we understanding? What is the implication that the presence of the authority figure is what encourages obedience? Because in this study, indirectly, when the authority figure is not physically present, dramatically, obedience comes down. It becomes almost one third, lesser than one third compared to the original study. So again, 1 mark for this finding, 1 mark for this conclusion. Total 4 marks are secured. If you look at the mark scheme of this paper for Oxford AQA, they have a rubric for every question, even for the smaller questions. So clearly in the rubric, you will be able to see they have mentioned knowledge should be detailed, it should be effective, it should be clear, focused. So I hope you're able to see all of that. How is it detailed, for example? Is it detailed by giving, like, say 10, 12 sentences? No. Only 4 sentences have been given for 4 marks. Because detail does not mean length. Detail means specific information. So, how details are being seen in this answer? Specific percentages. Those are the details. So this is how knowledge is detail. What you see on the rubric detail, this is what they want. Another thing you see on the rubric clarity. Is this clear? Yes, because look at the structure firstly. Finding followed by the conclusion from that finding. Another finding, another conclusion from that next finding. Very systematic way of writing the answer. Otherwise, what some students will do? Two findings together, then one conclusion at the end without referring to any of the findings. So it's not clear like the conclusion is coming from which finding. Here it's a very simple step by step logical pattern that is followed. That gives clarity. Is focus there? I told you many times. By avoiding giving unnecessary aspects like aims and procedure, complete focus is there in giving only the findings and conclusion and only proximity variation. Yes, baseline percentage is mentioned, but strictly for comparative purposes. Baseline by itself is not described. Any interpretation of baseline results has not been done. So the answer does not become irrelevant at any point. So you can see how all the requirements of the rubric have been met here. Let's look at the next question. There is some situation, so looking at it only we can make out this is an AO2 question. Any situation based question is AO2. Of course, there can be other elements also. They might ask for AO1 or AO3, but AO2 is definitely there. Fred and Jess are taking part in a psychology experiment on conformity. They sit at a table with 10 other participants and they are all asked, how many sweets are there in this bottle? All the participants say the answer out loud, one at a time. What is coming to your mind so far? As study, right? Majority pressure. Keep thinking as you go along reading any situation in any paper. Keep on thinking where is this coming from. That helps you to prime for the rest of the answer. Like in your mind, when you think, oh, this is from the Ash study, something very similar is being done here. Everything you have learned related to Ash, right from his original experiment to his variations to explanations for conformity, everything gets triggered in your mind and then it becomes easy to stay relevant. So don't just read the question mindlessly. Read it like this, connecting to what you have learned. That primes you and that helps you to understand what is being asked better. It gives better meaning to the question. The first 10 participants give their answers and all say 100. Fred gives his answer next. He does not agree with the other participants and instead says 55. Jess is the last participant to answer. She was not sure and was going to say 100. But after Fred's answer, she says 75. Okay. Using your knowledge of social support and locus of control, explain the factors given by Fred and Jess. So by this point, we have understood out of everything that we have learned in conformity, They want to know about one situational factor which plays a role in it and one individual factor which plays a role in it. Now, I know the first question coming to your mind was be that do I have to give both the points for both the characters in the situation? Like, do I need to apply social support and locus of control to Fred and then both of them to Jess as well? Of course not. That is not at all what is required in the question. They are just telling you these are two factors you will have to figure out. Social support is being shown by whom? Fred or Jess? In the same way, locus of control is being influential in whose case? Fred or Jess? And you will have to explain accordingly. So, one factor will apply to one character and the other factor will apply to the other character. Both factors do not have to apply to both characters. Next is, like I said in the beginning, it is AO2. It is fully application. So, in general, do you need to explain what is social support? No. In general, do you need to what is explain what is locus of control or any other details do you need to give about it? No. Strictly as these concepts apply to Jess and Fred, you have to give, of course, in full details. That doesn't mean just because you're not giving general description, you just name, for example, oh, Fred is getting influenced by locus of control, and you stop at that. No, you give fully elaborate points, but you make sure whatever you're giving is pertaining to the characters. That's how you remain fully within AO2. Also, do you need to give any evaluation? Of course not. There's no AO3 requirement. There's nowhere in the question mentioned give strength, weakness, or evaluation. So, strictly AO2 application. That's all. Now, in the model answer, I will show you how the CCL technique has been used to frame the points, because like many students will tell me they can understand, okay, 6 marks meaning 3 marks will be social support as it applies to Jess and 3 marks will be locus of control as it applies to Fred. Absolutely, very true. But how do we develop? Like, I just know how to name it and say that, okay, Fred is showing locus of control. Beyond that, what do I have to say? That I will show you with the CCL technique. I mentioned this in the previous part also, though I was not able to show in too much detail at that time. C means context, C means content, and L means link. All these three should be present in your paragraph, even if explicitly you're not phrasing it that way, but implicitly these three things should be there. Context means you take some wording from the situation. So let's say, let's take only Fred for now to keep things simple. What is Fred doing in the situation? Something about that you will have to mention in the answer. You can't just say that locus of control is influencing him. What behavior is he doing? What response of is he showing that locus of control is influencing him? You have to give some context. You have to give some specific example from the situation. Content means, okay, locus of control, but which aspect of locus of control is applying to him? Or how is locus of control exactly influencing him? Like, what is it about of locus of control which is being seen to play a role in his behavior? So, not in general, by content, I don't mean in general, like AO1, you start explaining what is locus of control, but how is it influencing Jess? You elaborate on that. And finally, link. Okay, so you have given some wording from the situation. This is what Jess is doing. I'm sorry, Fred is doing. Then you have explained a little on how locus of control is influencing him. Then you just reconcile the two. So, therefore, this is what we can see. This is how locus of control has made him respond in this way. Link is just like a conclusion. You can think of it as the triple C technique also: context, link, context, content, conclusion. This might seem abstract right now, so let's understand with the model answer. Fred's answer can be explained by locus of control. Okay, firstly, just signposting, just naming that, okay, this is the factor which applies to the character of Fred. So the examiner is ready that the rest of the paragraph is going to be about this factor. By itself, this will not get any credit, just specifying locus of control. But again, like I told you, there's a rubric for every answer. So in that rubric, this shows clarity, this shows focus. He appears to have an internal locus of control, meaning he feels personally responsible for his own decisions. This is content. In general, are they explaining what is internal locus of control? No. With reference to Fred, what is internal locus of control. But did they just mention? No, they explained it a little, elaborated a little. Personal responsibility. That is what internal locus of control means. So Fred is acting personally responsible. Now, where is the context? But how are we coming to know that he is feeling personally responsible? Because he's confident to state his own belief of 55, even though others are saying 100, still he's saying 55. This shows that he is feeling personally responsible. And then, fine. So, this is context. We are not just saying, oh, he feels personally responsible and leaving at that. We are taking wording from the situation and we are showing, see, this is where we are coming to know that he is feeling personally responsible. And then just the link. So, locus of control, specifically internal locus of control, is what is helping him to resist that unanimous pressure which is coming from the rest of them. So, therefore, this is how internal locus of control influences behavior. A little more today compared to the previous lesson, I will show you about AO2 questions. So, just 2 minutes we learn about something. One is in the paper, definitely you have to write in paragraph format. You do not write in bullet points. But for your own practice, you can start with bullet points and then eventually you can come to paragraphs. So, when you're doing your own practice of this paper, just write context or content, whichever you want to take first. Let's say you want to take content first. So, write like this. Even if you want, like how I'm writing in abbreviations, you can write that way. So, which content am I going to cover for this answer? LOC for Fred. And in that, which LOC he's showing? Internal LOC. What does that mean? That somewhere he must be showing personal responsibility. Okay, then in the context, how will I show that he's indicating personal responsibility? Like, what is there in the situation which will show that he's showing personal responsibility? Because he's giving some answer which is different from others. But will I write it that way? Will I write it in generic terms that he's giving some answer which is different from others? No, I will use exact wording from the situation. I will say explicitly that he's saying 55 when others are saying 100. So this shows that he feels personally responsible for the answer he gives. He feels it is his onus on what answer he's going to give in front of others. He's not depending on them for the answer. And then how will I link the two together? So finally, I can just make a statement of how this internal LOC is helping him to resist the pressure of the group, and that is why he's able to give his own answer. He's able to stick with his own belief. So yeah, I just have to combine the two and give clarity. This is what we are finding here. So initially practice in this way, then eventually you won't even need to do it like consciously. It will come down in the paragraph that you are writing. Okay, these mnemonics which are there, like CCL is there, PEEL is there, of course they are meant to take your answers to the top mark bands. You should definitely use them, but you should not become stressed out about using them. What I mean by that is, there's no rigidity, first of all, that you have to really take context first or content first. You can take any of them first. Take them as check marks or checklists. I have to make sure that my points are well developed. Now, when I say well developed, it seems abstract. So, I have to make sure context, content, link, all of them are there. Even if I'm not going in the exact CCL order, or even if in one sentence two are overlapping, but I just make sure all these three things are there. For example, I don't leave out the context. It should not be my answer is there without any specific wording. Or it should not be there, my answer is there without any brief explanation of what internal LOC is. So this is just checklinks. They are just making sure the CCL, PEEL, that you don't miss out on developing your points with everything that is required in them. So don't become rigid about them or don't become stressed out that you have to only use them in a particular way. No, they are just helpful guidelines for you. One more thing is, you have learned some definitions like of locus of control. So especially if we take say internal locus of control, you have learned internal locus of control means taking responsibility for everything, personal responsibility for everything. Sometimes what happens is, intuitively, when you look at a situation, like I'm sure most of you, when you read with me about what Fred was doing, you understood, oh, he's showing internal locus of control. But when it comes to writing, you just get stuck. What more do I write? Like, okay, I can say he showed internal locus of control, but what else to write? So once you've understood it is internal locus of control, think about what is the definition that I had learned for it. Of course, you do not have to write the definition by itself, that is AO1. But then start breaking it down. Take one word. Okay, internal locus of control, personal responsibility. How is Fred showing personal responsibility? Oh, he's giving his own answer. He's saying 55 when others are saying 100. He must be feeling personally responsible, because if he felt they were responsible, he would have given the same answer. But he's not doing that. So talk to yourself that way. If you're getting confused, what else to say beyond just naming internal locus of control? That can be a starting point, like I told. Remember its definition and then start linking whatever the character is doing to each part of the definition, like personal responsibility. Okay, so where is that in Fred? Then easily you will be able to come up with the answer, an elaborate answer. And then if you're not sure of the structuring, you feel you understand the answer well but you don't know how to put it down effectively, then make use of CCL. It sounds like a lot of effort initially, it might take a little effort also, but it's really simple. Try it for yourself. Using any of these techniques is not difficult. In fact, these techniques we should be very grateful for. Professors, teachers like Cardwell sir, Flanagan ma'am, they have given such brilliant techniques to make our life so much easier, for to make it so easy for us to write answers and top grade answers. So we should use these techniques in the positive spirit that they are there to help us, and they become automatically really quickly. Initial effort is there, that's all. Then it becomes a habit of writing answers this way, and you don't have to think twice before using them. So just put in a little effort, it's going to give you big rewards in the long run. Now, quickly to complete this answer, let's look at the next paragraph also. Coming to Jess now. Also, just notice, though there is no rule on how you should put the answer down on the paper, but how two separate paragraphs are taken in this and the previous. Doesn't it make the organization very neat? Like, think if you were the examiner, if you had to correct the answers, wouldn't make it so easier for you to just, know that, okay, everything is covered, the student has covered everything. The student is so clear on, okay, first I'm talking about Fred and this is the concept that applies, then Jess and this is the concept that applies. Reading in a flow becomes so easy for the examiner. So this way of putting down on the paper I strongly recommend, though it's not compulsory. You can see the same pattern again. So first signposting is there, that Jess can be explained through social support. Then the context has been given. So you can see in the previous one, content was given first, your context given first. Like I told, it doesn't matter. CCL has to be there in whichever order. So initially she was going to confirm, say, 100, because the group was unanimous, which created strong pressure. But when Fred gave a different answer, from there she got social support. So this is the full context. Like in her case, why are we seeing social support? That social support is coming from Fred. So are we saying generally she got social support? No. Using wording from the situation. Jess did this, he gave that 55 answer, then she felt social support, so she changed answer. This is known as context. Content wise, what is social support? Not being alone in disagreeing. So this is the content. Again, not given in isolation, referring to Jess. She knew that she was not alone in disagreeing. Finally, the link. So, okay, we saw that she's getting influenced by Fred. We saw generally social support means not being alone in disagreeing. So, how do we reconcile this? Basically, just gave her the confidence to deviate from the group norm or to go against the unanimity of the group, and then she was able to give the correct answer. So, again, full CCL paragraph. One last thing I would like to address here. Normally, in most of my videos, I focus a lot on EO3. But recently, there are many questions on EO2. Students are scoring poorly on EO2. That's why I'm dedicating more time on that for this video. Many times, students ask me, do we have to like write quotes from the situation given? Like, do we have to write exact wording from the situation? For example, do I have to literally write, Fred gives his answer next, he does not agree with the other 10 participants, instead says 55? Of course not. Of course, you do not have to follow exactly. But you can put it in your own words. It's just that key things, key phrases, or key points, I would say, don't leave out. Like, see, if I show you in the model answer, There is a mention of he's saying 55. Not, it's not like some belief, some answer, right? So exact wording is not taken, instead says 55, but a mention of 55. It's a key point. That answer which he's giving is deviating from others' answer. So giving that 55 helps to strongly show firmly that this is how he is differing. Or you can see she was initially going to confirm and say 100. This phrase is very important. It is mentioned in the paragraph that, one minute, I'll just show you where. She was not sure. So, very similar to that, she was initially going to confirm. So, those key points, phrases which are there, you can take as it is. But of course, you can reword it. In fact, I would say it is good to reword. Like here only, which I showed you the phrase, literally it is written was not sure. But the student has written was going to give a different answer, was going to confirm. Okay. So, absolutely, you can write in your own words. When we say take wording from the scenario, we don't mean just pick up literally whatever words are, then just print them on the answer. Of course, that is not what they want in any answer. They want you to copy the question as such. But you don't write abstract things, you don't write vague things. In the rubrics, many times you'll see knowledge is vague, details are vague. Those are always in lower mark bands. If you want to go to the higher levels, higher mark band, clear knowledge, exact knowledge, those words are used over there. So this is exact knowledge. You don't take exact wording from the questions, but you do take important key points which can drive your points very strongly. That is what we mean by taking wording from the situation, taking those relevant bits and pieces which illustrate what point you're making very clearly. Okay, so I know I've spent a lot of time on that question, but I hope it's helpful to you in answering all your application questions. We have an essay in this section. Like I told you in the last part, definitely there was no essay there, so we're going to get into a full essay into this one. With the essay, this time I'm going to save my time on the video, so I won't discuss very elaborately. Definitely, I'm going to give you very specific details on how to write, but not as much as I have given in some of my other videos because my time has got consumed in explaining the previous one. So if you want full details how to write 20 marker essays, there are dedicated videos on my channel. 20 marks essay, 16 marks essay, which is for the UK AQA, but it is equally applicable to you, whatever strategies I've given there. So even if you're an Oxford AQA student, please watch any video on 16 markers, 20 markers, and you will get explicit details on how to answer them. That much I will not be able to cover right now. Okay, let's look at the question. Describe and evaluate Ash's research into variables that affect conformity. This one, I have something very important to say about this because I remember when this question came up, there were queries like, what if the student has described the original study? The original study is simply not about variables that affect conformity. The original study is just about seeing whether people will conform or not. Secondly, in the syllabus, you have variations of Ash's study. You don't have the original study. Why the original study is outlined in so much detail in the textbook is just so that you can understand the variation studies. Since they replicate the procedure of the original, you won't be able to understand them only till you know the original study. But that is not for your exams. So definitely you have to give variation studies. In my opinion, the student should not be describing the original study at all unless for some reference. Like I showed you in the Milgram study in the initial part of this video, you do give the baseline findings 65% just to make the findings of the variations clear. That should be the only purpose of talking about the original study by Ash or Milgram in any answer. By itself, if the student goes on describing the as study, it is not credit worthy. That is something you can check on the mark scheme also. When they are talking about variables affect conformity, they want the variations. Next question is, there are three variations: group size, unanimity, and task difficulty. Do we have to give all of them? Yes, definitely. I can say that, oh, it's okay not to give all of them and the mark scheme is not explicit, but when AO1 is worth 8 marks in a 20 marker, how are you going to justify 8 marks without giving all the three? I fail to understand that. Next question comes, Do we have to describe the whole procedure? Do we have to give only the results? The results, the conclusions are the main things. Variation studies are meant only for results and conclusion. That's why the first answer was also of that nature only. Variation studies are not done to show some new procedure. They are not bringing some new paradigm into the field. Paradigm has already been established by the original study. Variations are just to show you what elements matter when it comes to that phenomenon, right? So you also have to focus on findings and conclusions only. I will be able to illustrate better with the model answer, which I'm going to come to very soon. So for describe AO1 8 part, give all three variations, give only the variations, do not give the original study. Give the original study only as much as is required to bring about something important in the variations. Otherwise, leave it. And yes, give main focus on findings and conclusions. In findings, to reach the topmost band, it's not easy on an essay to get full 20 marks. You will have to give exact quantitative findings again, percentages again. This paper is repetitive in nature. The Milgram variations they took initially, now they've taken Ash's variations, can't help it. For both, you have to follow more or less the same approach. Exact quantitative findings and then general implications, conclusions. So that is what I can say for AO1. Now coming to AO3, which is worth 12 marks. Like I told you, I won't go into that much depth, but at least 4 points of evaluation, preferably two strengths, two weaknesses, at least one with a counterpoint, at least one with a supporting study. Your supporting study is not that important because all these are studies anyways in AO1. So these are the general bits of advice I can give for AO3. And of course, every point should be in full PEEL format. In AO1, point should be in KUE formats. If any of these formats seem unfamiliar to you, please watch my dedicated video on how to write the 20 marker essay. And when it comes to evaluation, do you have to evaluate the original study? Of course not. If you want to evaluate something on the procedure of the original study, for example, you want to say it is unethical because participants were deceived, of course, you can take that point because, after all, the procedure is replicated in all of the variations. But the way you present your points is very important. If you're going to bring up deception as a point and you're going to talk about it with reference to the original study, you're not going to score. They're asking you about the variations, they're not asking you about the original study. So, yes, take deception as a point if you want to. But when you're talking about it, make sure with reference to the variation studies, you're criticizing them for being deceptive and not the original study. So, like I told you, the focus in AO1 has to be on variations. In AO3, also the focus has to be on variations. In neither of them, neither AO1 nor AO3, can you shift the focus to the original study. This is all time permits me to tell you in general. Now, with the help of model answer, I will explain to you everything. Model answer begins with a very brief line on Ash's original study. Like I told you, very brief, just so that the rest of the answer can be understandable. So it's all about a group of confederates giving an obviously wrong answer on a line judgment task. 37% rate of conformity was seen. That's it. That is the only description of the original study. Now coming to the variations. So immediately the answer comes on track. Just see how the variation is first named. Group size variation. Again, this is signposting the examiner. Instead of going on describing and the examiner has to figure out for themselves what is being spoken about, directly the candidate says, see, first we are going to look at group size. In terms of knowledge, understanding, explanation, this is knowledge that one of the variations was group size. Then for understanding what was done on this group size, number of confederates was changed. Is the original paradigm described or no? The procedures very briefly mentioned that number of confederates is changed compared to the original. But how participants had to sit in a group, how the three lines were looking, how was the standard line, how the comparison lines, those things are not mentioned. Because like I told you, the original procedure is not important, the variations are important and they are about findings. So after mentioning what is being done in one line, the focus comes to result. With one confederate, conformity was low, but with three confederates, it went to 32%. See, here the student hasn't done it, but I would strongly recommend you give the percentages for all the variations of number of confederates. Like for one confederate, the conformity was only about 5%. With two confederates, it was about 13%. With three confederates, it became 32%, and it stayed more or less constant from there. It did not vary after that. So your understanding has been shown. The findings have been presented in terms of mark scheme rubric detailed findings because 32% is there. So all that rubrics which I told you for the short answers, you can see they're applying here also. And yes, adding further confederates did not significantly increase conformity. So fully findings have been described very closely. And this is the conclusion also, that group size matters because adding more confederates did not increase. So at a certain level, group size matters. After that, it doesn't. Again, it could have been written explicitly. I would recommend that for a conclusion. This candidate hasn't written the conclusion explicitly, but it's fine because they have implied it. So knowledge, understanding, and in the final point, explanation, that adding more confederates, trying to increase the group size beyond what it is in the original study, has no effect. That is what this variation established. Then you can see for the next variation, unanimity, again signposting first it's mentioned. Then in one line, there is a dissenter who disagrees, one line procedure. Then the main focus, results. Exact numerical result, this time it came to 5.5% when the unanimity was broken. And then conclusion, just having one ally, one supporter can decrease conformity. Okay. And then finally, task difficulty, again it is named. Then the procedure in one line, the correct answer is made less obvious. The lines are brought closer to each other, something like that. Now here you can see the exact conformity rate is not given. Here we cannot blame the candidate for it. In the original paper only, Ash has not given the exact findings of the study. Exact percentages are not available. That's why the candidate has not given. So the examiners do take into account. If something is not available in the original source only, they cannot expect you to write. So don't worry about it. If it's not there, don't write about it. But in words, the candidate has definitely given the finding. So they have said that it increased compared to the original study. Only they have not been able to give exact percentage of increase. Like I told you, that's perfectly acceptable. And then the conclusion is there. What is the implication of this? That when uncertainties there, like informational, social influence, we're not sure about the right answer, then we are more likely to conform. So like I told you, I won't be able to get into much detail, but for each of the three variations, KUE points are given. I've explained where they are for the first one. You can try figuring out for the next two. Means each of the three variations are presented in a well developed way. In terms of the rubric, knowledge is detailed, it is effective, discussion is effective. So this will go in the top mark band. This answer definitely going to level 4 between 16 to 20. It's on the higher end, 19-20 marks. Let's look at now evaluation. Again, like I told you, not necessary, like no hard and fast rule how to put it down on the paper, but just see a separate paragraph for evaluation. By evaluation begins, and then for every evaluation point, a separate paragraph. Okay, so clearly breaking into paragraphs, just making it clear for the examiner where what is beginning, very easy for them to read. Think from the examiner's point of view. I know many of you will feel the lines given on the paper are limited. So you're not able to leave space while writing. You're not able to break into paragraphs. But remember, you always have the option of taking supplements. Make use of them. Okay, so first the candidate begins with the strength, high level of control, which was maintained in variation studies. How many students will deviate? Original study. Yes, you can talk about methodological issues, you can talk about control, but variation studies, not original study. In terms of Peel format, a point has been made, a feature has been pointed out, which is the strength of the study. Next, to give evidence, in the group size experiment, the task and confederates behaviors were the same, meaning the lines shown and how the confederates were agreeing and saying out the answer loud, that was the same. The only thing which changed was the number of people in the group. So in Peel format, this is evidence. A point has been made, control is there, but it will count as generic if some specific example is not given from the study. So in E, a specific example is given. Now explaining why is this a strength. Because any change in conformity rate is attributable only to the group size, not any other factor, because confounding, like potentially confounding factors have been kept in control. So in Peel format, this is E, explanation for why this is a strength. Of course, link is missing here. You could say this increases the validity of variation studies, but the point is so well developed that even if L is not there, it's okay. It's excusable. But if you prefer for a neat finishing, you like to give the L, just end it by saying it increases validity of the findings. Next, coming to a weakness. Artificial task has been used in the variation study. So this is the point being made. What is artificial? That evidence will have to be given, otherwise it won't be relevant to the studies. Judging lines is a trivial activity. In real life, what do people have to show conformity for? Political opinions or fashion trends. So this is the evidence. So why is it a problem if it's not matching something like political opinions or fashion trends? Because the increased conformity which is seen in these situations would not apply to real world where consequences have greater implications for the individual. This makes it a weakness. But now you can see in this point, to take the essay right to the top to 20 marks, the candidate gives a counterpoint as well. Just to remind you what I've told you in many videos, counterpoints are not required in every evaluation point, but at least in one of them, give them to really boost your answer. So here the counterpoint given is, even in simple line tasks, if someone's going to show this much conformity, like 37%, close to that, then in real life decisions when greater implications are there, like what to eat or what to wear, we can reasonably expect that people will show the same behavior. Like, no doubt it doesn't match real world situations, but then for a simple thing, if people get so pressurized, won't they get in real life when things are more serious? So from that counterpoint view, it can reflect, in fact, to a lesser degree, what happens in real life. Let's look at the next evaluation point. Another strength is given, practical application. So that's the point. Evidence is that something like having a single dissenter, like we saw in the unanimity variation, can reduce conformity, and that's what we want in real life. We want people to think for themselves. We don't want them to just blindly follow what others are doing. So that is specifically what can help in a real world application. So that we have mentioned in the evidence. Then why is this a strength? That has been explained with an example. Like in juries, when the jury has to give a verdict for the accused in front of them, what they do is they might get pressurized by what other jurors are saying, because it's always a panel of jurors. So instead of asking them to openly speak out what they think about the accused, whether they should be convicted or acquitted, we can let them have something like a secret ballot that can help them to give their opinion without getting pressurized by others. It can break the unanimous majority, like the pressure of the unanimous majority will not come to them. And then we can link off by saying that this is how immediate social pressure can be reduced. Or you can say this means that the findings have great scope for bringing change in real life. Finally, a weakness, generalizability. Just see how each and every point is focused on variation studies. None of the points goes back to the original study. What is the evidence for it being less generalizable? In all the variations, there are only American men. So very selected demographic is represented across studies. So what is the problem with this? What is the explanation for this being a strength? These specific conformity rates which we are seeing, like 32%, might apply only to American males, might not apply to other population groups. And to link off, it reduces the scope or the generalizability of findings. Means there's only a very limited section of people whom we can understand through these variation studies. Okay, so that is for the section on social psychology. I hope this video has been useful to you. If you have any doubts, questions, or comments about these videos, leave them in the comments box below. I might take some time, but I do answer all the comments. And in the next video, we'll take up part 3, which will be on Psychopathology, Section C. Until then, keep practicing. Exams are coming close in January, so keep revising thoroughly and do your best to score your best. I will see you very soon. Goodbye.